I get a lot of questions about music licensing, so I thought I'd consult an expert in the field. Michael Laskow is the CEO of Taxi Music, and he knows as much as anyone about getting your music in television shows, commercials, and films. In this series, Michael's going to answer a number of questions about the process that I know you've been asking about. Michael, how do people actually make money from music licensing?
They make it by either getting a sync fee, which is an upfront payment, which could range from very little money up to thousands of dollars. And then they get paid by their performing rights organization, which in America would be ASCAP or BMI or CSAC. And they get paid a performance royalty. Of course, that varies on the audience size of the show and how many times it repeats, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
From what I understand, the more you have in your catalog, though, the more opportunities you have to actually make things, make some money. And I guess it's a matter of more is better in this case?
Absolutely. It's a very wise friend of mine named Jim Long, who's kind of the Clive Davis of the production music library world, once said to me, Michael, it's a penny business. You got to make a lot of pennies, but it can pay off. I think a lot of musicians, when they think of film or TV music, they think of big orchestral scores, and they think, well, I'm not a composer. Or they see the word composer, and they think, I'm not a composer. What they don't realize is that it could just be an acoustic guitar, like one of those swampy alligator killing shows where the background music is nothing more than acoustic guitar with maybe a little slide dobro over it. If you make that, you're a composer. Somebody who writes country songs might not be aware of the fact that they could take a country song and just change the arrangement of it as far as you know, verses and choruses and intros, and just make it primarily an A section and then maybe a B section halfway through and just do a stripped down instrumental version. And now they've got something that's viable for a TV show when they're used to making records. So it's kind of retraining your brain to think in terms of applying the skills you already have to making music that will work in film and TV.
Okay, so coming back to the money for a second, is it mostly, are you getting upfront payments? Is that what you're more looking at, or is it something over time?
Well, if I had to make the bet for me, I would choose the overtime methodology. You can make both. Songs tend to get more upfront payments, sync fees. Whereas instrumental cues that are used, let's say in reality TV, generally you don't get sync fees for those. But the shows repeat a lot, and they repeat in a lot of markets, including internationally, so you can make money on the back end there. That's the stuff that adds up over time. We have Taxi members that are making multiple six-figure incomes doing nothing but instrumental cues. I affectionately call them stupid little instrumental cues because, frankly, you're not trying to create a grand opus. You're not trying to show anybody what a genius composer you are. You're just trying to make music that works well in the context of what you're pitching it to.
Are you making the same amount of money if on a rerun as something that's first run?
Honestly, I don't know. I would guess, and this is a pretty educated guess, that if it's rerunning in the same market, yeah, the PRO money, the performance royalties, would probably be the same because let's say it's running on MTV in America, same audience, same network, time of day probably plays into the calculation. I know that the formulas are way too complex for me to understand. I've tried. Then the same show on, let's say, MTV Italy would pay a lot less because the audience size is going to be smaller.
Is it all based on audience size then?
I believe audience size, time of day, and length of the piece.
Okay.
The thing to remember, I believe, is that it's not about do you have the greatest song in the world or are you the most sophisticated, talented composer in the world. It's do you have the right song for this scene? Do you have a piece of instrumental music that may be quite simple but really helps to elevate the mood in the scene or put an exclamation point at the end of a scene? So music has different functions in different contexts, and I think it's really important for music creators to start paying attention to the side of the industry they'd like to move into. sit down and watch TV with a legal pad on your knee and write down, force yourself to watch an episode of a reality show that you normally probably wouldn't watch, and make a note, because there are typically 80, 90, or maybe even 100 pieces of instrumental music, primarily instrumental, used in reality shows, and make a list. Here's an instrumental cue that is kind of a shit kicker country banjo-y thing that runs for 11 seconds. And then that one crossfades into something that is moody and driven by strings and maybe some soft keyboard pads. And then the next thing is comedic in nature. So all these different moods and emotions will take place during the course of a reality show. Each of them requires a piece of music. And it's the same hands playing the same instruments for a different purpose. And you need to understand what that purpose is so that you make the right kind of music for it.